Building an actual real AI project for a business is way different than doing a Kaggle competition. It can be a massive shock when it's your first real world project and your hard work gets shredded after 6 months. In this video, I'll show you my simple process to conduct real world AI project that I've run with multiple companies, mostly in the industrial sector. This has been taken from a talk I've given in October at a manufacturing conference, so all of the examples are pretty manufacturing focused. First off, a few observations. 91% of the AI project failed to meet expectation in terms of benefit from the executive. So I stole that stats from a Deloitte report. Also, I've talked to a few consultants in digital transformation, and they told me that most AI projects, although pretty cool, don't move past the proof of concept stage. These numbers align pretty well with my own observation when I consulted or helped folks get their project in shape. So the question I'll be answering today is, how the heck can you make a successful AI solution for a business? I use mainly 4 steps. They are sorted in order of importance for the project success. The first one is usually not present in any academic settings. So first off, identify the real problem to solve. It might be easier at the start to take every project you receive at like face value in terms of like their future impact for the business. But I'm telling you, you absolutely should not, especially if they come like from way above the pyramid of the business. In order to make a successful project, you will need to bring the key stakeholders and start the project like back from the beginning in most cases. This isn't always possible and is one of the main cause, if not the main cause, of project that just doesn't work out. So what I usually do is pretty simple. I bring everyone that makes sense in a division for a given project in a room for like 3 hours. And here I don't mean like only the execs or whatever. I mean like everyone that matters for this particular unit in terms of like making it work better. So it usually include a mix of people, like a key individual contributor, the top folks from the department, some people also from other departments that are kind of part of the process in some way that like the project will encompass. You bring them all in and then you start from the very beginning. You want to hit important problem with your project in order to gain the most scarcest resources in the business, which is attention. So what you're aiming for is the top right in the Eisenhower matrix. If your project is for like a non-problem or something not urgent or not important, people won't be interested in helping out, bring it to the finish line or use the end result. There's many ways to find a real problem. The matrix of Eisenhower is one way. You can do like a little exercise with it, or like you can use the 5 whys. The bottom line, you need to find something concrete that is core to the business and it's kind of a root cause. Once I identify an important problem, I like to dig a layer deeper and understand the sequence of events that lead to the problem or like the opportunity to happen. This is important because very rarely an AI project should be applied to a whole flow from the get-go. It's usually best to restrict the project to a specific step, which is the bottleneck in some workflow. These bottleneck steps are very multidimensional, and AI can help smoothen out some edges here. Identify that steps and map its input and its output, along with the context at which it lives. That context will be very useful later on when we're actually developing the AI solution. If you're there at this point, you have a problem that is worth solving, so congrats. Like that's like 90% of the job done, like for real. You need now to structure your data to make the project feasible. Here, it's important to know that data and in which state it is will be the rate limiting step about what you can do in an AI project. You might come back to this step after a first jab at the project to realize that like, oh no, I need to collect this other data point in order to make the project feasible. It's fine. You just need to make sure that you assess to the best of your capability what you have and what you can play with. So step 3, you identify the right AI based on your data set and the context in which the project is surrounded. This context is especially important to understand the quirks of the data. So here, it's very important. When I say AI, it doesn't just mean the LLM. It can mean like a simple linear regression if needs be. So I usually have 4 scenarios to select the right AI. We're going to go through them. The first scenario is when the context is very complex and there isn't really that much data available at all. So a good example of this is a project where you need to select a supplier for a critical project for the business or to invest in a new technology that is emerging. So in that specific setup, please do not use AI. Use visualization and your brain. That's it. In that situation, you don't have enough to go on to build an AI solution. It just won't work. And frankly, your brain has an enormous advantage in this like high context, low data situation. And visualizing the data and trusting your gut is like good enough here. Next up, we have tabular data, assuming in an abundant enough amount. The type of business problem that will fit in here will be like sales or demand forecasting or production planning. Anything basically that can be opened up in some way in Excel. So for that, it's usually much better to leverage like tree-based classifier like a random forest or XGBoost or the likes. These models usually perform still better than neural-based architecture with mid-sized data. When you have that type of project, honestly, it's a pretty straightforward road to a solid solution. So if you see tabular data, you have like a good project setup, and then you have the data, you're in for a good time. Next up is images and video data. So two examples here will be in the manufacturing sector, will be like the manufacturability analysis of engineering parts or machine monitoring with video streaming, that type of stuff. Basically anything where a human need to look at something visually in order to make a decision can be applicable. So here, no need to reinvent the wheel. Usually the best type of model are either convolutional based or vision transformer based. That's it. I would always take a look at the literature to find specific type of network architecture that shows the most promise, giving the context and the data that you have. And just start from there. Nothing too complicated. You most likely not need to do any difficult architectural design. If you have video data, it's usually the same type of network with a modified backbone architecture. Something like a slow fast network could be a good place to start. But always check out where the literature is at for your specific dataset to make a call on your backbone. So last type of data I'm going to cover in this tutorial is text. There are other type of data that you might encounter like 3D data or various type of sensor data, but these are a bit less ubiquitous in my experience. So two examples of project you might be doing with text will be stuff like automation of administrative tasks of some sort, or like categorization of supplier based on some type of documentation that is unstructured. So back in the old days, you would start up the project with a very intricate series of work with natural language toolkit to like create your solution. Since 2020, text-based projects usually rely on massive models that were pre-trained with big internet scale datasets. So these models are usually zero shot or few shot learner, which means that you only need to prompt them properly to get some smart output out. So you most already know all this stuff if you haven't just like woken up from a coma. Understanding how in-context learning works here can really help you craft great prompt for these large models. It's important to keep in mind how these models were trained when using them, because they're usually made to always predict the next token. So keeping that in mind help you understand a bit more where there might be some issue in some task. So for instance, the model will hallucinate. So mistakes in some setup will happen. So you should try to not use LLM in business critical process or a process where there's just no room for creativity. Otherwise, everyone will yell at you when statistically speaking, the model will do something a bit too creative. So beware of that. However, you should use them in setup for like rapid prototyping, when there isn't numbers involved, or setup that are prone for summarization. That's really where they shine the most. Or also when you have a human in the loop in some sort of way to validate the output. By the way, the landscape here is starting to change a bit with foundational model being released in non-textual setup, like with the segment anything model. So always keep your eyes open to the literature, because you might mix some foundational model in some of the image stuff that you're seeing or other type of project. Finally, don't think you can just make one shot at this and call it a day. You're going to have to iterate on a solution in order for your project to be successful. So the core reason for that isn't because it's too complex to make the full project to start with. It's because, especially in these type of project, usually the stakeholders have very little idea on what they want or need or what is possible. So as soon as they see something from you, this is where like the light bulbs goes on, and then you can start to map out the path forward, and they will have a better idea of the direction you should take, which in my humble experience is almost never the direction you were about to head to start with. So start small with a very crappy functional MVP and iterate on a solution multiple times. Even if at the end of the day your model will need to be hosted on the cloud and make use of Docker or whatever it is, don't start there. Start very, very small, like just a crappy visualization of your model output or just of the data, and then gradually improve your system or your analysis while collecting approval from stakeholders and tweaking your methodology. This is the way to go forward in the business setting. So to recap here, find a real problem, get the data, structure it, select the right AI, and finally iterate on the solution properly. So you do these steps and you are guaranteed two things that will happen. One, the project will be a success, of course. Or two, the project will not be started at all early on because it's not what the business should be focusing on to begin with. In both cases, you win. And I understand like there's a lot of politics involved in this type of stuff, but here I'm assuming that like the executive or whoever came up with the project is acting in good faith. Don't follow these steps and get fired, please. Like do your best. Generally speaking, this is like kind of the framework you should follow when you're dealing with a business level AI project. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like if it was the case and leave a comment if you have any question. I'm here to help. Have a great week everyone and see you in the next video.